Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of our /ProRevenge, where many of you come to get your daily dose of satisfaction. In this episode, there are two stories. The first is how some students got revenge on a school dorm monitor, and the revenge is so well done. The second story is a revenge on a lady who demanded English be spoken around her. I hope you stay for the stories today and subscribe for future videos. Story 1. Car in a block of ice. For various reasons, I went to a boarding school in Pennsylvania for my sophomore through senior years of high school. It wasn't anything criminal, just mental health issues and learning disabilities that the regular school wasn't equipped to handle at the time. One of the dorm monitors was a royal jerk. Any day he was on duty was a nightmare. He would always stick you with on-campus only, also known as grounded, for the littlest thing, and complaining about it got you in sight, which means you had to be visible, couldn't hide in your room, or even do homework until bedtime. He was a typical I'm-in-charge bully. One year, he got bad news right after returning from Thanksgiving. A family member on the other side of the country was in bad shape with health problems, so he had to go take care of them. He lived in a rough neighborhood and didn't trust his car to be in one piece when he got back. So, he asked the school administrators if he could leave his car at the school while he was away for about 6 weeks. They agreed, with the only stipulation being that he had to leave the keys with maintenance so they could move the car if the parking area needed plowing. He parked his car on the grass around the side of our dorm in the second week of December and left. However, he didn't leave his keys, which will be important to the story. He didn't return until the end of January. We decided to get revenge on him because the dorm was full of teenagers. The water spigots didn't have regular handles. Instead, they used a strange square key kept in the office, only used with permission. However, a pair of flattened pliers worked well to turn the water on. We hid a hose in the bedroom closest to the car, which was also right next to a spigot. The kid who was supposed to be in that room slept elsewhere so he wouldn't be woken up by someone coming in every 20 to 30 minutes, unrolling the hose, hooking it up, turning on the water, giving the car a misting, and then rolling up the hose again. Every day from sunup to sundown that car got misted. We even got help from other kids in our classes who lived close enough to bike over during Christmas vacation. One even showed up with a lawn chair and a book so he could stay and mist it again as soon as the last layer had frozen over. No staff were in the school buildings during Christmas vacation, so he didn't get caught. In the middle of the night, 2 days after we returned from Christmas vacation, I was one of the two people on duty with the hose when the monitor for that night came outside for a cigarette. He saw me with pliers in my hands and asked, "Did you forget something?" holding out the water spigot key. That's when we realized just how much this guy was disliked. Then he offered to help ice the car as well. By the time the jerk returned, his car was encased in a block of ice, at least a few inches thick. When he complained to the administrators, they told him that because he hadn't dropped off the keys, everyone assumed he'd changed his mind about leaving the car there and would move it later. When he tried to get his car out of the ice, he couldn't just attack it with a hammer, as that would break every window and destroy the paint job. The only way to remove the ice was the same way it went on, slowly, in 20 below zero weather. He tried using a small blowtorch, but that didn't work because he got impatient and pressed the torch against the ice, which kept putting it out. He got the bright idea of hooking the hose to the dorm's water heater, but the weather was too cold, and I'm pretty sure he just added a few layers of ice around his car. After we saw what he was trying to do, all the hoses on campus miraculously disappeared. He ended up running back and forth with a couple of tea kettles, melting a channel so he could chisel out the ice between them. We kept turning the burner off when he left the kitchen. He quit working for the school at the end of June. Revenge is a dish best served cold, in this case, served as a car in a giant ice cube. Be nice or your car will be ice. Story 2. This is America, we speak English here. I just discovered this sub, so I hope my story fits here. This story begins when I was a freshman in high school. After school on most weekdays, I would walk to my uncle's house to babysit my little cousin, who was about 2 or 3 years old. He liked to go to the public park directly in front of my uncle's house. It was a simple park, about the size of a football field, with a playground in one corner and the rest all grass. One particular day my cousin was begging me to go to the park, so I took him. For a while we were the only ones there. My cousin was too scared to go down the slide from the top by himself, so I was picking him up and letting him slide about halfway. He was having a great time and laughing. Soon a lady came up with her daughter, and they started playing on the swing set. The lady was sitting on the bench, while her daughter tried to play on the swings. Here's an important part of the story. When I speak with my little cousin, I use our native language. He can understand English, but I'm so used to talking in my native language with my family that it happens naturally. So, I was talking to my cousin, encouraging him to go to the top of the slide, and he was psyching himself up. Then I heard the lady yell out, "Hey, you need to speak English." I said, "Huh? I'm just telling him to—" She cut me off and said, "This is America. We speak English here." I replied, "I'm just trying to play with my cousin. He doesn't speak English too well." The lady responded, "I don't care. You speak English around us. We don't know what you're planning." I thought, planning? Do you think we're going to rob you or something? I was pissed off. I was just there with a child who was visibly having an awesome time at the playground. There was no reason for this lady to impose her nonsense on me. So I decided, fine, if she wants me to speak English, here's some of it. I said to my cousin, "Hey, let's ignore this dumb jerk," and continued speaking in my native language, telling him to slide down. The lady said, "What did you just call me?" I replied, "Oh, I called you a jerk because that's what you're being." She then said, "Oh my God, I'm calling my husband, and he's going to kick your butt." At this point, I felt the need to get out of there, so I started telling my cousin, "Let's go." While I was trying to leave, she kept yelling and screaming about how her husband was on his way and was going to kick my butt, blah blah blah. She even said she was going to call the cops because she thought I was a creepy pedophile with some random kid. I got home, but I was paranoid for a few weeks, thinking the cops might want to talk to me or something, so I avoided the park for a while. Now, let's get to the revenge part of the story. We're in the present, and it's been over 10 years. I've graduated high school and got a job at a plant. This plant is one of the few places in my city that pays well above minimum wage. A lot of people try hard to get in, but few do. Most end up moving out of the city or commuting over an hour where the good jobs are. I'm not trying to brag, but through a series of promotions and being in the right place at the right time when certain people retired, I ended up being number 2 at the plant. I have a great plant manager who has faith in me and has taken me under his wing. One of my responsibilities is hiring people and ensuring they're trained properly. A couple of weeks ago, we had to let go of one of our office ladies for reasons. I called the placement agency we use and let them know I needed an office administrator type person on Monday. When Monday came around, guess who showed up? It was the lady from the park. For whatever reason, she didn't recognize me, but rest assured I recognized her. Her face is ingrained in my brain. I went through the typical introductions and passed her off to HR to fill out paperwork. After that, I gave her a tour of the plant, then handed her to the office ladies to start training. That was most of my interaction with her. I'd pop by the office during the week to check on her performance and get updates. I started thinking, what am I going to do? Do I want to keep this lady on staff? Is it even worth taking revenge? If yes, what should I do? I made my decision on Thursday. Through conversations with her, I found out she'd wanted to work at this plant for a long time. It was like a dream job for her. I decided to lead her on, make it seem like she was staying with the company, and then let her go unexpectedly. On Thursday, I set up an appointment with her to finish some training. During the training, I talked to her a bit more and asked if she'd been living in the city for a while. She said yes, and I asked what part. She mentioned she lived near a park by my uncle's house. I said, "Oh, I used to go to that park all the time. I used to take my little cousin, but I stopped because I ran into this racist lady one day who threatened to have her husband beat me up because she wanted me to speak English." Her face changed. It went from kind of happy to straight ghost. I think it finally clicked in her head. I concluded the training and didn't say anything else. Friday came, and she showed up to work. When she went to lunch, I called the placement agency and told them to call her and let her know not to show up after lunch, that we wouldn't need her anymore. I could do this because she wasn't an actual employee. We just had a contract through the hiring agency, and we didn't need a valid reason to let her go. There was something very satisfying about firing someone while they're on lunch. That's the story so far. I'm sure the office ladies aren't too happy with me because they'll have to retrain a new person starting Monday, but it'll be okay. Ah, sweet revenge that happens 10 years after the initial incident. It seems like the universe really wanted me to get back at this lady somehow. My favorite part was when she called her husband to come kick my butt in front of some kids. I really hope she was kidding. Story 3. Nobody likes a bad manager, especially one who's a thieving and dishonest person. This story is titled, "My Manager Was an Awful Person to Me, but I Got Her Fired in an Embarrassing Fashion." Years ago, shortly after I graduated high school, I got a new job to support myself during college. The new gig was in a pet store, and I was working in the department that sold fish, aquariums, reptiles, birds, and so on. The store manager was an awesome guy named Kurt. Kurt was an old-school guy. He went to work, worked hard, and went home. That's all he expected out of you as well. My immediate manager over my department was this large, snaggle-toothed witch of a woman. I'll call her Stephanie. We got off to a bad start because she quickly found out that I knew more about reptiles than she did. Her ego couldn't handle a fresh employee not needing her guidance. From then on, she was terrible to me. She singled me out to clean the goldfish tanks and had the other employees cover sales every day that I worked. She would say rude things to me, such as, "You're the weak link in my team," or "You're the reason I'm having problems in this department." Fast forward about a year, and my hours had been cut by 25%. I asked the store manager what the deal was, and he told me that our department had lost too much money between the lack of sales and broken merchandise. This puzzled me, but I didn't think much of it because everybody's hours were cut. Simultaneously, myself and a few other co-workers had noticed something strange. Stephanie had recently taken much more interest in the customers. She insisted on helping certain customers and sending us to do busy work while they were there. A customer came in one evening and was talking to us about how nice Stephanie was. Turns out Stephanie was breeding mice and selling them to customers outside of the store. We found out that she was breeding all of her animals, her dogs, turtles, and mice, and selling them to customers that she met through our store. Not only was this taking business from us, but our store had a couple of corporate policies. We didn't feed nor sell mice as live food for snakes, and we donated a lot of time and money to shelters and condemned the breeding of dogs and cats for sales. Stephanie was making money by selling animals to the customers, all while her department had hours cut for all of its employees. It didn't quite make sense how this was costing us so much money until one evening when I thought I'd figured it out. Stephanie was otherwise a lazy woman, but when one of her customers came in, she was by their side the whole time. I watched closely as she followed a customer around, helping them pick out a cart full of expensive aquarium decorations and terrarium supplies, like lights and bulbs. I followed and wrote down every single item that she grabbed. I wanted to see where this went. She directed the customer to a register and went to check them out. I noted the time and went back to work. I later spoke to the cashiers about Stephanie checking customers out, and they said she only ever rang up certain customers, and she acted weird when she did it. They suspected that she was abusing coupons for them or applying hefty discounts. I got my CO workers to corroborate my story about under-the-table animal sales and suspicious behavior, and I went to talk to Kurt. I handed him a paper with about 20 items and the time written on it, and I said, "I think if you look up a transaction from Register 2 at this time last night, you'll find a large discount applied to it. These are the items that I'd expect you to find on that transaction." He was a bit puzzled, and I explained everything to him. I told him I didn't want to make any accusations before because I wasn't sure, but after seeing her in action I was pretty sure something was going on. He thanked me and assured me he would look into it. A couple of weeks later I was at work and I noticed Kurt standing near the doorway watching closely. It just so happened Stephanie was coming in for her shift right about that time. The second she walked through the door, he called her over to his office. Apparently, waiting in his office was a regional manager from corporate. He looked at the list I gave him and looked up the transactions from the night before. He found one at the exact time I wrote, but it only registered about half the items I listed. However, every item that was on the receipt was on the list I gave him. This prompted him to watch over her for a few weeks, and in that time frame, he found her to be taking her customers around, shopping, personally taking them up to the register, and scanning every other item while putting the expensive stuff into the cart without ringing it up. In that time span, she had given away over $1,500 in merchandise. He looked back at the logs we kept for broken merchandise that's written off and found an excessive amount of aquarium supplies and decorations that were signed off by her. All in all, she was charged with stealing and defrauding the store in over $3,500 in merchandise. It just so happened that Kurt had already arranged for police to meet them right after firing her to escort her out. I don't know if she went to jail, but I did watch her get walked out by police with about 20 employees staring. I wish I could have said something, but I had to settle for her making eye contact with me as she walked out, to which I gave her a little quick wink. This story is titled, "Bad Neighbor Gets What's Coming to Her," or "Lady Purposely Hit My Truck Because She Didn't Like Where I Parked, So I Got Revenge with Mice." I was visiting my cousin who lives on a street that has no garages and very few driveways, so everyone parks on the street. This makes for a lot of people having to find parking where they can and walk to their house. Since parking is scarce, I parked across the street from his house at the first open space. There is no reserved parking, handicap signs, or anything. It's just street parking. When I came out to leave, a car had parked in front of me, but it had actually hit my truck and was still sitting there, touching it. It didn't do a ton of damage, but it did dent my bumper and my grille. I assumed the driver just didn't realize what they did. It wasn't a big enough deal to call the cops, and I didn't know what house they were attached to, since few people end up lucky enough to park in front of their own house. I was basically going to forget about it unless I saw the car's owner. I snapped some pictures and wrote down the license plate. Just then, another neighbor came out and told me that he watched the car park and that the driver was mad that someone parked in front of her house. She then had her passenger get out and direct her to back up just enough to barely hit my truck to teach me a lesson about parking in front of her house. The neighbor told me about how she's done this before to other people's cars, how everyone on the street hates her, how he's caught her red-handed putting extra garbage bags next to his trash can. On garbage day, because she thought he'd already gone to work, those extra bags cost extra to haul, and how she's taken people's cats and dogs to animal shelters and instructed them to be put down. Just a real witch of a woman. So now I'm pissed. Rather than confront her and need to get the police involved, I decided to get revenge. First, I took a diabetic syringe and shot some superglue into all the house's exterior door locks. Then my cousin and I had drinks on his front porch while we waited for her to get home. When she got there, I saw a spinster, grouchy-faced lady in her late 40s or early 50s. She gave us a glare for no reason as she stepped out of her car. Of course, she couldn't get her key to work, and we watched her try to get in her house for an hour before a locksmith showed up. He couldn't figure out the problem either. She ended up getting a contractor to come out and break in and then replaced all the locks. She never had a clue why it stopped working. I wasn't finished yet, though. The next day, I went there with a can of pepper spray and sprayed her front door handle with it. Pepper spray leaves behind a slight oily residue, and people touch their face way more than they realize. So, again, we waited on the porch with my cousin to see her come home. 15 minutes after she got home, she came running outside holding her face and screaming. She tried to get in her car but couldn't see to drive. We asked her if she was okay, and she didn't know. So we called an ambulance, and she went to the hospital. She came home and said the doctor thought it was an allergic reaction. Instead of thanking us for helping her, she said if we were decent neighbors, we'd have driven her to the hospital and saved her the cost of the ambulance. So I decided I was still not done. I waited a few days and drove by to visit my cousin again, and her car wasn't around. I walked around her house inspecting. I saw a small broken window pane in the basement window. She had an unfinished basement that you could see through the dirty glass. So I went to the local pet store and bought 100 gray mice, making sure to get 50 males and 50 females, plus some rodent food. I went back to her house and dumped all 100% through the broken window, along with sneakily dropping in the food. 100% breeding mice can multiply rather quickly. A month later, she called an exterminator, and a week after, she put her house up for sale. All the neighbors badmouthed the house to all the potential buyers, and she ended up accepting an offer about $100,000 less than her asking price. Good riddance. Karma's a tough one sometimes. Sometimes a perfect child isn't so perfect. This story is titled, His Own Parents Didn't Believe Him. This happened to my friend G back in the 1960s. He was 14 to 15 years old, in high school, in a small West Coast town in the USA. G was a small, easygoing kid. He did some work cutting lawns or something for his neighbor, Rich Douche, who was the same age. Of course, Rich Douche stiffed him. G's parents complained to Rich Douche's parents, who couldn't believe their little perfect son would ever do such a thing. There were a couple of other incidents, mostly Rich Douche stealing credit at school for work G had done or bullying, but Rich Douche was a suck-up as well as a weasel, and nothing ever happened. He wasn't even suspected. The key point: Rich Douche had an electric typewriter, rare in school, and bragged about it and showed off his efforts. He claimed to get better grades on typed papers. So, revenge. Like most of the houses in the town in that bygone era, security was minimal. It was easy to slip into an unlocked window. So, that's what G did when the house was empty. He brought a little file with him and filed a little off the bar of the E character on the typewriter, just enough to make it unique. He then slowly typed up a page. G didn't type, so it was hunt and peck. The page started with, "Ha ha, the stupid teacher never reads this far. He's a real jerk," and continued for a full page. It used every dirty word he could think of, and especially insulted the vice principal in charge of the teachers. He then left with his piece of paper, leaving everything else untouched. Several weeks later, Rich Douche had typed up another paper. It was paper clipped together, per requirements. G somehow managed to distract either him or the teacher and slid his special sheet in the middle. Rich Douche failed the class, though he'd been getting good grades up to that point. He appealed to the vice principal. The extra insults directed the vice principal's way made the vice principal allow the teacher's grade. Rich Douche claimed that someone else must have typed that, but upon closer examination the modified E character matched on all the pages and didn't match any other typewriter. Checkmate. His own parents didn't believe him. Once they started looking, they found a lot more bad behavior that they'd ignored, and Rich Douche ended up in military school, not the place you want to be in the 1960s. What a way to end the stories! I hope you enjoyed them today. If you want to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future stories. See you guys in the next one.